So if you're not familiar with layering masks yet, you're going to be, because it's a very useful tool for adding the grunge effect, which is really neat for those kind of retro logos, the ones that are faded, maybe a little bit organic, kind of some of the ones we went over in the class, that grunge effect. So we're going to use the layering mask and kind of show you how I kind of created this effect that you're seeing on the screen. So here's some simple typography. It's Azo Sans Black. I'm just going to go ahead and create outlines. I'm just creating outlines. And I wanted to kind of add a little bit of softness to the edges because right now it's kind of got some sharp points there. So I'm just going to kind of highlight everything. I'm getting my direct selection tool. I'm going to be doing this a lot in the class. And I'm going to be kind of, let me go ahead and see if I can select the first. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit and you'll see these little points where I can be able to click and drag, and globally all throughout everything I have selected, you can see how the curves are being changed as I shift this around. I'm just going to do a very slight curve, kind of just adds a little bit of softness to it. So I'm going to do that throughout to make sure I have kind of the look I'm going for this particular typeface. And so just a little tip when you're doing that kind of rounded edges effect, if you have different sized lettering and you try to do it, it's not going to allow you to. So you just need to select the similar sized type and do it all at one time. So I can do all of the word effect globally all at one time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right here. So you can see how I'm able to change all of it globally, just add a little softness. I wouldn't be able to select all of them and do it at the same time because they're different. They're going to be different angles on each one. So just did one word at a time, have my nice rounded edges or corners, and I'm ready to go ahead and apply an effect to this. So right now we just have black. I'm going to go ahead and show you a great resource. The link is in the resource guide. These are some fantastic little grunge. These are actually JPEGs. These are just like photos. So you could really do this with any photo. And you can also do it with vector as well. You don't have to just put a photo on there. You can actually get vector grunge textures, or you could do geometric patterns, anything you want to overlay on top of your text. So I'm going to go ahead and group this together. So I'm just going to right click and group them all together. I'm going to take the texture that I downloaded from this resource. Here it is. It's just a simple JPEG, nothing too complicated. I'm just going to kind of size it up. Okay. And one thing I want to do is, I want to put it on the top layer. So we want to always have the texture be on the top and what we want to punch out on the bottom. So I have the texture on the top. I'm going to go ahead and select all of it. I'm going to go over to my transparency panel right here, and I'm going to click on Make a Mask, and it's going to go ahead and adapt it and make a layer mask right here on the right. So this is our layer mask. Right now it's linked right here to our grunge effect typography. So you can see how it kind of overlaid that particular texture over top of the text. There's also a really neat kind of option here if you want to go for a really destroyed look. You can go ahead and invert the mask, and anything that's black is going to be white and everything that's white is going to be black. So it's going to really reverse kind of the texture here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on invert mask, and you can see how it really kind of accentuates a lot of those darker areas. So you can always just click back off of it and go back. And so you can try that with a lot of different textures. There's also vector grunge textures. You can even make your own texture, which we're going to do here in just a moment as a little bonus exercise, and then apply it over our type. So before we go and create our own texture for this, we are going to go ahead and use this and finish this up. I want to create a nice wave in this so it doesn't look like straight text. It has a little bit of curves in it. And so that's another tool I'm going to be able to show you that I use quite a bit, and it's going to go down to Effect and go down to Warp. And so these are really great warp options when you come with typography. You got to be careful not to overuse them, to use them subtly so you have a nice realistic effect. So for this one, I kind of want to have a wave effect or a flag effect. So let's go ahead and try the wave. And that seems to work really good. But see how it kind of warps it a little bit. I want to kind of have, I believe, the flag effect would probably be what I'm looking for. So that's okay. We just go down to warp. Let's go to flag. And we don't want to have such a dramatic effect, so we're just going to turn the dial down a little bit. We just want a little bit of a subtle curvature, just like that, kind of a neat wave. We can go ahead and change the color on all this as well. We can have a nice pop of orange. Let's make this a bright orange. Got a right click, arrange, sending that to the back layer. And we can click on this. Let's say I want to change the color. Right now it's gray. So we have our transparency. Anytime you want to edit or look at your layering mask, you're going to bring up the transparency panel. So here's our layering mask right here. This is how we affect this. So if I have this selected, I can go ahead and shift around this texture to how I like it. So you may have a different position you want to put the photo on to have the right grunge effect that you're looking for. But to go ahead and edit the actual text again, we need to click right back to this layer. That's the kind of the trick. And I'm going to change this to maybe a dark blue, maybe a deep blue or purple, and then kind of change the coloring on this just a little bit more. Just doing some tweaks, and we have kind of a neat effect. So that's kind of how I went about adding the texture, adding a little bit of a wave, which you can go to effect and go to warp and do all sorts of different types of kind of wave effects, because you kind of see a lot of logos do that where they kind of have that wave and flow, and you wonder how they do that. Some people do it by hand, but I think that's quite a lot to do. And you got to get grids and get it all working. But if you wanted to kind of create that effect quickly, just make sure you just go to warp and you'll be able to do these kind of little effects quickly. So let's create our own texture, because we maybe want to use a vector one. For whatever reason, when we create our own, and we can practice that layering mask one more time, we're going to do that right here real quick. So we're going to be creating our own texture. There's several ways we can do this. To get the grunge effect that you see here, you probably need to find something with a photo, because it's really, really hard to get all these little details and have it remain in vector. It can almost break your computer if you start to create a texture that's too complicated, that has too many anchor points. So sometimes that's when photos or really, really high-res JPEGs really come in handy with creating the grunge effect, because using the vector version of that really, really slows down your computer. So as you're starting to create your own vectorized little patterns or kind of this grunge effect to have as layering masks, if your computer starts to crash or get really slow, that's very common. Even my computer has issues. So that's why sometimes using a JPEG resource is not a horrible idea to achieve that effect. But just if you're curious and you want to know how, I have this little brush here, paintbrush tool. You can do all sorts of different ones. You can even do the pencil tool. Maybe let's try the pencil tool for this one, because I like nice thin lines. And it's going to look absolutely ridiculous, but I'm just scribbling. I'm just trying to get a more natural, gritty kind of texture, just kind of going around. It just looks absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to let go. And right now I don't really have a stroke on, so I'm going to make sure I have a black color. You can choose whatever color you'd like. Flip it to a stroke. And what I like to do is fairly thin strokes for the effect we're going to do. So I'm going to go down to stroke, and I'm going to make it a pretty thin stroke. And right there I can take that and make that as a layering mask. Or we can go up to effect, and we can go and do a couple of these warp tools, or we can go to distort and transform, which will take this and really distort this stroke and do all sorts of crazy things to it. And that's what we want to have with a crazy grunge texture. So we could do a pucker and bloat and kind of see what that looks like. So let's do a pucker or a bloat, and you can see kind of some crazy effects that you get. You can see how slow your computer starts to get. I'm going to continue to mess with distort, maybe do roughen. Roughen's kind of a neat texture. Ooh, that's kind of neat. So there we go. That's crazy. And I bet if I go even crazier, wow, look at that. So let's not do it quite as crazy, and let's add more detail to that. There we go. Let's go ahead and click on OK. Let's see what smooth looks like. And this is a true experimentation. Any combination of these destroy, distort, roughen, you can create all sorts of different combinations. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. There's kind of our homemade texture. Looks a little bit crazy, doesn't it? But we're going to apply this as a layering mask. So let's say I want to release this mask. I don't want this one anymore. All you have to do is press the release button, and boom, you got that released. And it's going to go ahead and show the picture released. Okay, so there's our picture, or we can just either slide it out of the way or delete it if we don't want it anymore. And you can see how slow my computer is, because anytime you have this complicated vector, all these anchor points that the computer is trying to load, it gets really, really slow. So don't be surprised if your laptop or your desktop cannot handle this. So here we are. One thing I can do is right now it's set on a path. So one thing to maybe simplify this little kind of homemade texture is just to go to Object, Path, and we can outline the stroke. So that's going to outline all the little strokes. It might make it a little bit easier for the computer to handle it. It took about 5 minutes, but my computer finally outlined the stroke on this, so now I'm ready to apply it. I have it on the top over top of the type. Let me go ahead and position it how I want. You can see how complicated that is. That is hugely complicated. That's all in vector. That's probably a million different anchor points. Let's go ahead and select both of our graphics, and we're going to apply it just like we did a JPEG, and we're going to click on Make Mask in the Transparency panel, and let's kind of see what this looks like. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of our little grunge effect that we created. I kind of like the other one a little bit better, but it was fun to kind of see what that would look like. So that's the grunge effect. So I'm just kind of going over some tools that we use quite often in this class.